This is Don. I like to chat this way rather than write a letter or write a blog. What I want to talk about today is about liberty. Now, in our Constitution, I am an American, even though I live in Mexico. In the American Constitution, it says that we are born with certain inalienable rights. Among them is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, that's true. But we should be able to make our decisions. If we're in the world by ourselves, say, like Adam, and there's only nature around us, then we can make decisions. But those decisions about ourselves and doesn't impinge on anybody else or anything else. Essentially, basically, this is our right to life. Which also brings up the point, if I want to take my life, to destroy my life, or do whatever I want with my life, I can do that. There's no one to say that I cannot do that. And I say that is sort of with caution, because we're assuming that we're like Adam, and we're in this world all by ourselves. Nobody else is here. And so there's no doubt that my life is my life, and I can do what I want. And if I decide to take my life or destroy my life or to drink my life away, I can do that. That's my right as being a human being. So also, I have life, liberty, and also I can do what I want. Now I'm in this world, let's say there's no grocery stores, there's just trees around, and I pick fruit and I do whatever I want to do. I can do whatever I want to do. There's no one to say I cannot do what I want to do. Okay, I can do what I want to do. I have the liberty. If I want to live in a cave, I can. If I want to live in a castle, I can. If I want to get up late, I can. If I want to get up early, there's no rules. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, I think that last one is sort of a difficult one. We all want to be happy. So what makes us happy? Well, I will seek for what I want to make happy. And part of my want to be happy is to be free and to live. But I might make a little bit different choices if there was somebody else there. Okay, well, I use the analysis that is like Adam, but don't forget that Adam didn't come to the world by himself. He came with Eve. And we all know that story. They couldn't agree on everything, and they had discussions about things, and so Eve wanted to eat the fruit, and Adam didn't. He wanted to obey God, but then Eve persuaded him to eat the fruit, and then they were cast out of the garden. And that is where we all are. We're not in the world all alone. We're in this paradise with others. We're in a society. We're in a group. We're in a marriage. We're in a relationship. As soon as we let somebody else into our life, we're not like Adam, all alone and just nature around, but now we have somebody else in our life. And that changes the whole picture. That all sounds good, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. As soon as we add pursuit of happiness, we're in a problem. We have a problem, okay? Because we like to have, Eve in our life. We like to have children in our life. We like to have other people in our life. And as soon as that happens, the whole situation about inalienable rights changes. And now we have to do something else. If we're in a society of some type, we're in a culture, the culture will decide, will influence what we do. We have a religion, or we have a marriage, or whatever we have. Essentially, that is modifying our life and liberty, okay? Because we want to be happy, essentially. And we're not born as individuals to live entirely alone. It's a very good. You have the story of Robinson Crusoe. I mean, you know, his life was pretty miserable until Friday came along, and his life improved quite a bit, but also became more complicated. And this is part of the whole thing. Well, this is a preamble to what I really want to talk about. What I value most in my life is my liberty, my freedom. And in order to have that freedom, it's complicated. It's not an easy thing because you live in a society and there's others influencing your liberty. Now, I want to talk about my particular situation. I was married for 23 years. I was, and had 5 children. And a lot of responsibility, of course. And I had a wife. And unfortunately, my wife and I didn't see all issues equally. So when I more or less was 42, I more or less lived a little freer life outside of my marriage. I wasn't doing anything that was wrong. Is that I was more or less involved in other people's life. I sort of got part of the so-called 70s movement and hung out with young people and shared their philosophy. And essentially, I always had that philosophy. It made it difficult for me because I wasn't the conservative type. So what happened was, at 42, my wife at the time was 48, pretty close to 50. She was 6 years older than me. That I had been a dedicated husband, a faithful husband, a good father, and then my wife got pregnant. And I'm 42 and she's 48. And we didn't have a very happy marriage. We stayed together, but sort of like two drowning people, okay, clinging to each other in some ways, and in some ways very, very separate. So I decided in my mind, I put in 23 hard working, faithful years into this marriage. And now I have to start over again with another child, another 20 years or so. I guess in the back of my mind, I always felt somewhere maybe that I would attempt to being free. Okay? And I did. I made up my mind there that I would not continue in this marriage, that I would stay with my family for 1 year till my son was 1 year old, and then I would leave. I didn't know exactly how I was going to leave, but I was going to leave. Well, the 1 year came around, and my wife and I was still having these problems and seeing counselors and one thing and another. And so I decided that this was the time to leave. And Providence being what it is, I will call it Providence, a person came to my life who had an apartment in Manhattan. And it was one of those apartments that was rent control, meaning that the rent was very, very low, especially for Manhattan. Especially in the area, this was in the Village. And he offered it to me. He says, well, it's my girlfriend's apartment, but she's going to move in with me. Now, we think it's going to be okay, but she wants to keep the apartment just in case it doesn't work out. Okay, I can see that. So essentially he's saying you can have the apartment, but if my girlfriend wants it back, you have to surrender it. At that time, I'm getting a little ahead of my story, at that time I decided my solution was to leave my wife, but not to leave the family. So I had an apartment in my house that I moved into, and essentially forbid my wife to ever enter it, and I would not have a relationship with her anymore. And but the children could come and see me, and I would support the family, continue to support my wife and the children and everything else. It's just that I no longer was in a relationship with my wife. Well, that would have been fine if my wife left it alone, but she didn't. She would often come down and tear up my apartment. My friends come over to see me. She would throw things at them and chase them away. It was crazy. And I couldn't continue that way. It was okay as far as I was concerned, but it wasn't okay as far as she's concerned. So I took that apartment in Manhattan. I moved into it. Now let me tell you, the rent was $32 a month in Manhattan. I mean, you don't get an apartment in Manhattan for $32 a month. But anyhow, I moved into that apartment, and it was a nice apartment because the way it works in New York, they have rent control, and the landlord can't up the rent as long as the same owner is there. Well, what people do is that they move into the place and pretend that the original owner is there, and so the rent cannot be raised. And so anyhow, it's a scam they had in Manhattan. I don't know if it still exists. So I moved into my apartment. I'm not saying it was nice. I was very lonely and very alone. But then, as it shall be, I met a woman. Okay? And having a partner really helped a lot. My loneliness went away. I was not desperate. And I was okay. Even though I made attempts to see my family, every time I would show up to see my family, I intended and keeping in contact with my children and supporting them and doing what I have to do, she would throw me in jail. Okay, so there was no dealing with her. I tried many, many times to come up with some type of arrangement that we both could agree upon, where I continue to be the father and to be able to see my children and to be involved in their life. But she was a very vengeful woman, and she was not going to have any of that. Anyhow, this is what I did in order to have my liberty. I had to have my liberty. I had sacrificed myself for 23 years, and now I was going to live my life my way. So coming back to the liberty theme, you need, in order to have liberty, to be willing to make the sacrifices, whatever you need to do. If it means leaving a family, leaving a relationship, or changing a job, or whatever it is, you must change your environment so that liberty is what you have. So, you people out there, I know many of you would like to have liberty. You've got to make the changes as strongly as I did in order to have that liberty. Okay, people, thank you for listening. Bye-bye.